Hi, everybody. My name is Victoria Foos, and I'm the planner who was assigned 270 Sheppard Avenue West, which is the development we've heard about tonight, just on the east side of Addington. So I'm going to take you through a presentation tonight about some of the transportation concerns in the area of Sheppard and Addington. I'm not a transportation planner, so I will be relying on my colleagues who are with us virtually. We have Arthur, who is a senior planner in transportation planning, and we have Christina, who's a traffic planning technologist in transportation services. So similarly to the meeting we had for 290 Sheppard Avenue West, this meeting is being recorded. So please keep that in mind as you share your comments and in the Q&A function and as you share them verbally. So to get us started, I just want to orient everybody on where the area that we're talking about. So you'll see here the blue box is the site at, we call it 270 Sheppard Avenue West, but it's formally known as 258 to 270 Sheppard Avenue West and 1 and 3 Addington Avenue. So that is the site that's identified in blue. We have the site in green, it's 5 Addington Avenue, and as part of the 270 Sheppard application, we secured what will become a future public park on that site, so just north of the 270 site. And then in orange, we have the 290 Sheppard application, which we just heard about. So to get us started, I'm just going to provide a quick status update on where staff are at with the 270 Sheppard Avenue West application. So the application to amend the official plan and the zoning bylaw was approved in principle by the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal in April of 2019. So that application was appealed by the applicant and was taken to the LPAT where it was decided that the application was appropriate and was approved in principle. So the final order from the tribunal was withheld until the 3 following items were satisfied. So the first was that the official plan and zoning bylaw were in a form satisfactory to the city. The Section 37 agreement is executed and registered on title. So as part of the Section 37, staff negotiated and we were able to secure $1.134 million and boulevard improvements along the site's frontage on Addington Avenue. And the applicant is to resolve all outstanding engineering comments from engineering and construction services. So staff are working with the applicant now to satisfy those above 3 items. As I said previously, we've also secured an off-site parkland at 5 Addington, and the size of that park is 608 square meters. And although the rezoning and official plan have, for the most part, wrapped up through the tribunal process, we are continuing to review the site plan control application. So the information related to the site plan application is available on the city's AIC, the Application Information Center. So using that application, you can view everything that the applicant has submitted in support of their site plan application. So just to summarize very quickly some of the key stats of what this development proposes, it's a 9-story mixed-use building. So there's 170 residential units and 977 square meters of commercial gross floor area, and that's all located on the ground floor. As part of the application, the applicant is providing 196 vehicular parking spaces, which includes 150 spaces for residents, 35 spaces for visitors, and 11 commercial spaces. Majority of those spaces are provided in an underground parking garage, but there are a couple that are provided at grade at the back of the site, which I'll show you in a moment when you see the site plan. There's also long and short-term bicycle parking spaces that are proposed, and there's a total of 151. The application also proposes indoor and outdoor amenity, 402 square meters of indoor amenity, and 344 square meters of outdoor amenity. So this is the site plan that the applicant has submitted with their site plan application. So some of the key things that you will see here are the area just north of the subject site. It indicates that it's the future public park, which will be dedicated to the city. Just south of that public park is the site's driveway. So it's right now a 2-way driveway, 6 meters wide along the northern property line that provides access to the servicing area and the underground parking. We then have the frontage along Sheppard, where there's a number of new trees that are proposed to be planted. There's the commercial access off of Sheppard, as well as the main principal entrance to the residential building off of Sheppard as well. As part of the latest site plan application, the applicant has submitted what we call a functional plan. So based off of some comments that we've received from residents previously, we have heard that there are concerns about the queue time to actually make turning movements onto Sheppard Avenue from Addington. So as you can see on this plan here, through the site plan application, we've been able to secure formalized turning lanes, so a left and right turning lane from Addington onto Sheppard. So that's something, like I said, that will be secured through this application. The applicant's plans have indicated the size of these lanes and the technical components of them, which have been accepted by our transportation staff. So similarly to the right and left turning lanes that were requested by the community, there have been a number of other interventions that have been requested to resolve some of the transportation concerns that are felt throughout this area of the city. So the first intervention, as I mentioned, was formalizing those left and right turning lanes southbound on Addington onto Sheppard. So as I've already identified, we have received a functional plan from the applicant that has actually secured those, and that will be finalized through the site plan control process. The second intervention that we have heard is in regards to prohibiting right turns from the 270 Sheppard site driveway north onto Addington. So in response to that request, staff are exploring options that may limit turning movements from the site driveway north onto Addington. However, City Council can also implement enforceable turn prohibition. So that would be implementing a no turning sign, and that becoming enforceable would actually be done through the City Council process. The second intervention that staff have heard is in regards to traffic calming measures on Addington. So a boulevard extension along the site's frontage on Addington was something that staff were exploring. However, in order to secure the left and right turning lanes on Addington, we weren't actually able to proceed with that boulevard extension. So as a result of the turning lanes, we weren't able to implement a traffic calming measure along the site frontage along Addington Avenue, sorry. So the last intervention that staff have heard to date is in regards to on-street parking restrictions on Addington Avenue south of Wentworth. So changes to on-street parking permissions are again approved by City Council. So it's my understanding that the residents can put forward a request to Councillor Fillion's office, and he will deal through that request through City Council. But as part of this development, new developments are to justify their proposed parking rates, and they're not permitted to rely on on-street parking facilities to satisfy their parking demand. So back when we were reviewing the parking ratios that were proposed for this application, it was determined that the application could not rely on on-street parking to make their parking ratios work. So based off of the justification that the applicant provided, staff accepted the proposed parking rate, which again includes 150 resident spaces, 35 visitor spaces, and 11 commercial spaces. So in addition to that parking rate, the applicant has also committed to providing preloaded Presto cards to each new unit and to operate a car show vehicle on site to support lower vehicle reliance. So that is it for me on kind of the update on where we're at with the application and what we've heard so far and how we've been responding to those interventions. So if anybody has any questions, we are happy to take those now.
We have a question in the chat from Verena Baker. She asks, will a traffic light be installed on Addington? And if so, are there plans to remove the traffic light from Brentwood? I live off of Brentwood and would be difficult to exit my dead-end street without a light.
So I will defer that question to Christina from Transportation Services. I will note that traffic operations is a section within Transportation Services that deals heavily with traffic light, traffic signal coordination. So Christina will answer the question to the best of her ability, but if there is any follow-up that's required, that's something that we can do following this meeting. So Christina, if you can answer the question about traffic signals.
Hi, this is Arthur Lowe with Transportation Planning. Christina just stepped aside for a second, so I can help with this question. Traffic operations did undertake a signal warrant test for Sheppard and Addington. So they looked at the existing crossings of pedestrians, also collisions, and they found that it didn't meet the warrants for installing a signal at the location at this point. So I think Marcus wanted to add to that.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Okay.
Yes, go ahead, Marcus.
Okay, thanks. Just to jump in, so our office has been doing a fair bit of ongoing work with transportation operations staff to take a look at some of the various options. And as was raised at the meeting we had just over a year ago, there were issues with the warrants that have just been mentioned, but also the proximity between a signal both at Addington and Brentwood and Senlac. Having three signals in such close proximity would have also created quite a number of complications. Opposite Brentwood is also Easton Road, which is very heavily utilized going into the neighborhood south of us. So removing from that location was certainly not an option recommended by staff. Where we have gotten to, Victoria spoke about the sort of the double lane southbound on Addington to facilitate turns. I don't think that she mentioned that another aspect of that was for staff to do some work coordinating the signals at Brentwood and Senlac on Sheppard West to create more of an opening, more of a gap between both these east and westbound traffic to facilitate turn movements coming off of Addington, which was an important piece. So they have started already to work on that signal timing, but as they did that, we also got into COVID. And there was a recognition that the traffic patterns that exist today, the commuter patterns that exist today, are not really indicative of what they would normally be. So that work will be ongoing as we get back towards more regular traffic patterns to try to ensure that we have that sufficient gap to make it possible to turn more easily off of Addington.
Thanks, Marcus. We'll go on to our next question. Do we want to take somebody who's raised their hand?
Yep, we can talk to. We have a question from Jennifer Quaid. Jennifer, if you'd like to direct your question, you are now unmuted.
Thank you. Given what's going to obviously be increased traffic patterns coming off of Addington onto Sheppard Avenue West, going both east and west at that corner, would you consider prohibiting a left turn coming out of the proposed new hotel at 290 Sheppard Avenue West to at least minimize some of that, I hate to use the word impact, but hopefully not impact? But would you consider prohibiting a left turn coming out of there?
Arthur, I'm not sure if Christina is back on the line and wouldn't be able to answer that question. If not, could you answer the question about possible turning prohibitions on the 290 Sheppard site?
Oh, hi, it's Christina. I'm back. For the 290 Sheppard site, the consultant have provided gap studies showing that there is enough space in the traffic to facilitate the left turning from the site. If there is a need for a restriction at this site, the council can impose a restricted turning for the site.
So as somebody living in the neighborhood, how does one define a need? Because, I mean, once we get all these cars coming out of the 270 Sheppard, it's not going to be fun.
Can I jump in again for a moment?
Yeah.
So Jennifer, I think one of the issues that came up last year when this was first being discussed, and there was some discrepancy between did we want to limit traffic coming out of the 270 site onto Addington? Did we want to limit it going right, or did we want to limit it going left? You know, on one hand, you do add additional traffic to the turn queues at Addington if you are forcing the traffic left coming from that site. But I think many of the residents along Addington Avenue were particularly concerned that if you're forcing the traffic right, all of those new residents in the development will be adding congestion to that particular street, and particularly on the north section where we don't have sidewalks and you have the culverts in place. There were concerns about that. So the discussions as they currently exist are looking at forcing a left turn, not prohibiting a left turn, and directing that outcoming traffic from 270 Sheppard West to Sheppard West, and thereby protecting the stretch of Addington from undue traffic penetration. That is something, again, that would have to be addressed at council once the driveway actually existed and a turn prohibition could be put into place. Something that Councillor Fillion is certainly very happy to bring forward. But again, there may be some discrepancy on what the preferred option is. But I think at the same time, there's a reality that until a development is in place, we can speculate what the traffic impacts are going to be, but we don't really know what the day-to-day impacts are going to be until the traffic is there. So some of that, I think, will have to be observed, and there are some things that are being done today proactively to anticipate that, but other things that will have to be done reactively once we know what we're really dealing with and dealing with those problems as they exist.
Okay, thanks.
Mark, I think we can take the next question.
We have another question from Jessica Merrick. Jessica, if you'd like to direct your question, you are now unmuted.
Is it possible to have the traffic calming north of the property on Addington Avenue? That street is being used right now as a racetrack, especially by UPS trucks that race down across the bridge. So if we could have traffic calming right before the bridge at Addington Avenue and Addington Place, would that be possible?
I'll defer that question again to Marcus. It's my understanding that he's been, again, talking with traffic operations staff on some possible traffic calming measures within the broader area.
Thanks, Victoria. Yes, and Jessica, we have, as I think you know, passed along the petition that you kindly circulated to traffic operations staff to take a look at, to then take a look at the warrants for traffic calming and come back with a recommendation. So certainly it's very helpful. The first warrant gets met by having a community consensus that's been demonstrated. One of the complications on Addington, again, is the traffic calming measures usually come with sidewalk installations. So it would be, I think, much easier to consider that on the stretch of Addington south of the bridge than the northern portion. But we're still awaiting their analysis coming back that was triggered by the petition. So it is something that we're actively looking at. Victoria, I don't know if you want to address the boulevard improvements next to the park that we were discussing briefly this morning, because that was a new piece to me that I heard today, and something else that we may be able to look at to address some of the traffic calming issues, speeding issues, encouraging turns in a specific direction, some of those outstanding issues.
Sure. So as I had mentioned previously, we were looking at a possible boulevard extension along the site's frontage on Addington Avenue, but as a result of the request for the left and right turning lanes, we weren't able to proceed with that boulevard extension. There just wasn't enough width in the traveled portion of the road to accommodate both turning lanes and a boulevard extension. So in result to the concerns we've heard about traffic calming and turning movements outside of the site driveway, staff are exploring a possible boulevard extension along the park frontage. So again, on this map, that's the site that's identified in green. So there's a potential where a portion of the boulevard would extend out into what is currently the traveled portion of the road. It would make that road portion narrower, which would, as Marcus said, help to work as a traffic calming measure, it would actually result in no parking in front of that park frontage. It would reduce speeds of people traveling along this segment of Addington. So we recognize that, the park frontage is a small frontage along this segment of Addington, but it is one measure we can implement through this application that would help to contribute to the overall traffic calming measures in the area. So it's something that staff are exploring currently, and through the counselor's office, we can provide any updates on that as we proceed to explore that option.
What about also like right before the bridge?
So that's not something that we would be looking at as part of this application, and I think that's where Marcus had identified we would be that's being looked at by traffic operations staff through a petition that was filed through the counselor's office.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We have a written question from Kim Clark. When does the city plan to widen Sheppard Avenue?
So the planned right-of-way width of Sheppard in this portion is 36 meters. So through this site, we are securing a 4.89 meter road widening. So that means the applicant is conveying 4.89 meters of their land to the city along the Sheppard frontage. So currently the plans for that widening are for increased pedestrian and public realm space, boulevard space. As far as I'm aware, there are no plans to actually increase the number of driving lanes along Sheppard. We're using these widenings at the current time to increase, like I said, pedestrian space and improving sidewalk conditions and boulevard conditions by adding additional trees. Arthur, if you have anything you want to add about the future condition of Sheppard, please feel free.
I think you've covered it there. I think until a plan is developed for the whole streetscape of Sheppard, we'd be acquiring land incrementally through development, but there isn't a kind of full-on widening plan at this point.
Thanks, Arthur. So I think we can move on to our next question.
We have a written question from Sean Belshaw. Are speed bumps an option on Addington?
So as I had said, as part of the development application, we are looking at a curb extension as a possible traffic calming measure. We're not looking at speed bumps, along the limits of the 270 Avenue West Sheppard application. 270 Avenue West application. But Marcus, I don't know if through your conversations with traffic operations, there has been any discussion about speed bumps as a traffic calming measure.
We haven't gotten into anything specific, and just by way of background, and this may have come up at the meeting that we held last year. John, as many of you know, has been around these parts for a long time and has sent out over the years dozens and dozens of traffic calming packages to residents asking for traffic calming measures, whether speed humps or other forms of traffic calming, which generally are triggered by getting a petition back or demonstration of community consensus. Up until this year, I don't think we'd ever gotten back a return package. And in the last 12 months, I think we've had now 3. Which is probably telling as to how conditions are changing throughout the neighborhood, and there's a growing concern on this stuff. So John's position has always been to support residents where there is consensus. So we took the petition forward, provided it to staff. We were going to look for some of their recommendations, probably come back to the community once we have those to talk those through, because speed humps are certainly effective at calming traffic, but they do have some unintended consequences that are a bit more negative. So that conversation will have to continue, but we're going to wait to get that feedback from staff, which I imagine will be coming fairly shortly. As I said, that went into them about 4 to 6 weeks ago.
And I would just add to that also, to what Marcus just said. It's David Cooperman from Transportation Planning. I would just add that there is a traffic calming guide available for anyone who's interested, and it is a public document. Anyone can access it online. It doesn't have a simple URL to get to it, but it was produced in 2016, And you can quite simply just search for traffic calming guide for Toronto, and it should come up. And that explains all of the steps in the process, including sort of the beginning with something like a petition for the community and polling. And it also goes through the different measures that that are considered for traffic calming on a street.
Thanks, David. I am just trying to send that traffic calming guide through the Q&A function, but I'm having some difficulty. So maybe if one of the staff members can ask a question about the traffic calming guide, I'll be able to respond with a link to it, so everybody has it. In the meantime, I think we can take our next question.
Yes, we have Lesia and Joe Connolly with a verbal question. Lesia and Joe, you are now unmuted.
Oh, hi there. I'm just wondering what was in that petition again you mentioned, and how it might affect traffic coming to the site from Senlac via Addington.
Thanks for your question, Joe. Marcus, I think I'm going to defer this one back to you because my understanding, like I said, is that you're taking the lead on this petition.
Yeah, and to be clear, the petition was specifically related to traffic calming on Addington, so slowing down the cars that I think we're using or are using the street as a racetrack, as it had been described. I think Joe's asked other questions before about inbound traffic to the site, with some questions about parking configuration and that type of thing. The answer is it's a lot more difficult to control how the inbound traffic will access the site, what type of controls are available to us. Joe, I think by email previously had asked some questions about the parking configuration, and one of the challenges we've had on the site, as was addressed at the beginning, the permissions for this application were effectively provided by the LPAT on appeal. So our capacity to have leverage over the applicant to arrange the site plan in whatever way we thought would be best was quite limited from the get-go. And that's been one of the challenges and why we are really troubleshooting, sort of working around the edges here, trying to come up with what's going to be least impactful to the community with elements that were effectively imposed on us.
What was in that petition, though, exactly? Just quickly, if you had it. Hello?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Oh, I was just wondering what was actually in that petition.
The petition asked whether there was support for traffic calming measures. I don't have the wording in front of me.
So by traffic calming, that means something below the equivalent to 30 kilometers per hour or bumps. Like, is that what it's about, I guess?
It could be speed humps. It could be chicanes. It could be different types of curb cuts. There are a number of different types of traffic calming with various pros and cons that the city has in its arsenal. Like Victoria, I was trying to cut and paste the link to that to post it, and I wasn't able to do it either. But I'm certainly happy to send that on to anybody that's interested.
Yeah, I've read that. The other thing we brought up in the meeting, I guess it was it was before COVID. Anyway, it was there was talk about no parking as well. And I think near the site, I think there's parking control there already on the street. Probably need more. But was there any thought to that as well? I think that's something that just has to be requested as well. And I'm talking about Sheppard and Addington.
It's again something that typically has to be requested by a majority of residents or a number of residents, and then supported by a majority of residents in the affected area. So a shout out to anybody that's listening in from Addington Place. They did a great job about a year ago getting everybody together and talking it through and deciding exactly what they wanted the parking permissions to be on Addington Place. John moved that through North York Community Council and had the status there changed. So that's certainly something we can look at on Addington. It's certainly something we can look at on Wentworth. Many, if not most, of the streets in Willowdale have parking restrictions, just I think primarily based on the proximity to transit stations, so that you don't have neighborhood streets turned into commuter parking lots. So it's question again of neighbors talking to neighbors, coming up with a consensus, and once that exists, it's fairly straightforward to move that through generally.
All right. Okay, thanks.
We could jump to a written question from Sean Belshaw. Are there going to be designated Uber taxi drop-off spot in front of the building on Sheppard? I see this is an issue stopping traffic at other condo buildings.
Thanks, Sean, for your question. So I'm just going to take everybody on my presentation to the applicant's, ground floor plan. So this is the ground floor plan of the application. So you can see, again, along the northern limit of the site is the two-way site driveway, and it takes you back into a circular loop, and that's where pickup and drop-off activities would take place. So as part of the city's review of the application, pickup and drop-off activities similarly to parking in association with the site can occur on city property. So staff wouldn't accept pickup and drop-off activities taking place on Sheppard. So the applicant has provided an on-site pickup and drop-off facility for those activities to occur. I think we can go to the next question. And just while we wait for the next question, I'll note that Stephen has added the traffic calming guide under Sean Belshaw's question about the designated Uber taxi drop-off. So I hope that that's something that everybody can see, and we'll post it again throughout the presentation just so that guide is available to everybody.
I see there's two hands raised in the chat. Just wondering if Jessica Merrick has an additional question. Jessica, you're now unmuted.
Hi, it's actually Doug Merrick. Instead of planting trees, can we put parking? Is there enough room for parking on Sheppard Avenue?
So I will let Arthur answer this question, but as part of the secondary plan that was done for this area, so that's the Sheppard secondary plan that was approved by the LPAD in 2019, I think it was already. So we had identified that the streetscape for Sheppard would be widened boulevards, tree plantings, and that no lay-by parking was going to be included along Sheppard Avenue. So that's kind of the streetscape plan that we've envisioned for Sheppard through the secondary plan. But I will let Arthur expand on that if he feels the need to add any more details.
No, I'm just wondering, so Sheppard, when it's finally done, is there going to be a left turn lane down the middle and two going each way? Or is that what the finished idea is supposed to be?
Sorry, so Sheppard Avenue along, like this portion of Sheppard?
Yes, similar to, say, Sheppard Avenue East.
So I'm just going to go back up to the site map. So you're talking about on Sheppard at Addington, a right turn lane?
No, what I'm talking about is the finished, when Sheppard is finally widened, is there going to be 4 lanes of traffic and a left turn lane in the center, or is it just going to be 4 lanes of traffic and widened sidewalks?
Arthur, do you have?
Yeah, sorry, this is Arthur Lowe. So I think as Victoria mentioned, the streetscaping plan for Sheppard is not complete. And so I think the details for operations and where we might locate center left turn lanes would be explored through that process. So at this point, can't specifically say where there might or may not be additional left turn lanes. But just to respond to your comment about parking as well, so on Sheppard, the streetscape that's envisioned, as Victoria said, wouldn't have parking on Sheppard itself. So we do support this particular site, managing the parking and drop-off operations and the driveway behind the site.
So are the access to the stores all on Sheppard Avenue?
Yes, so I can take you back to that ground floor plan, but yes, predominantly the access to the commercial properties you can see here. this is a ground floor plan, so you can see the boxes that are labeled retail commercial. They have their frontage off of Sheppard predominantly. They are showing for one unit off of Addington. And then in addition to the commercial and retail entrances, there is a residential lobby entrance off of Sheppard as well.
Okay. All right, so the people have to park underground to go up and then go upstairs to the stores.
So there is at the back here, where that traffic loop is, that pickup and drop off loop, at the northern limit of the site, there are 3 parking spaces that are proposed at grade. So those could be used as short-term spaces if somebody were to utilize the commercial spaces. But the idea would be that users of the commercial units would walk, be from the area, take transit, or like you said, if they were to drive, then and there were no surface parking spaces available, then they would be parking underground.
Okay, thank you.
Mark, do we want to move on to the next question?
We have a written question from Madeline Kovacic related to construction of 270 Sheppard Avenue West and cranes that have recently toppled over in Toronto. Are we sure the cranes will not be over residential properties and all measures put in place to prevent any accidents over residential properties?
So as part of any construction that's going to take place through this application, there is a construction management plan that will be provided by the applicant, and that is reviewed by Transportation Services. So if Christina is still on the line and wants to speak to construction management plans and some of the things that they're going to be looking at as part of it, I think in terms of cranes, that's something that when those accidents had happened, I believe it was Toronto Buildings and their inspectors that went out to investigate those incidents. But as part of the broader construction management plan, we would be looking at construction activity and where the impacts would be, whether it be on Sheppard, on Addington, and how those activities would take place. But back to cranes, they wouldn't, I don't believe that they can actually go over or encroach on private property without permission. But that is something we could follow up with you on if you want to send me an email.
We can go to the next question from Lesia and Joe. You're now unmuted.
Oh, hi there. It's just Joe again. I had a question as well. Oh, one quick comment first. I was looking the other day, and there's very few stoplights along Sheppard itself. There's about 3 of them between Yonge and Bathurst. And on the other side, I know it may be busier over there. There's about 5 stoplights on between Bayview and Yonge. So there seems to be some more traffic control over there, and that may be busier. But the other question I had too is also with respect to over there, there's a lot of road closures south of Sheppard between Yonge and say Bayview. And I've seen this in other parts of the city too, where they do one of those quickie road closures that can be opened, if some emergent vehicle has to go through. I know when I try to drop my kids off at school, I constantly can't get down any street, but that's the idea. Has something like that, which is a bit more radical, been considered at all?
So I think that was a 2-part question, and we'll start with your question related to the number of traffic signals along Sheppard near Bayview. And Arthur, if you want to explain kind of the warrant system and how we determine locations of traffic signals, that would be great.
Yeah, I can do what I'm aware of. So this would typically be a traffic operations question. And certainly we have our road safety team involved with these conditions as well. But I know that generally when under the goals of Vision Zero, our road safety team are looking at more opportunities to locate pole signals, maybe even when they were not previously warranted for safety reasons. But I'm not sure as to what current reviews have been undertaken for this particular corridor. I see Marcus raising his hand, so he probably knows something.
Yeah, I'll gladly jump in here with a few notes. And Arthur's absolutely right. The city's transportation department has changed its approach quite a bit over the last few years, in line with the city's Vision Zero safety program, addressing pedestrian safety and other forms of vehicular safety like bike safety. So we've had an opportunity over the last 12 to 18 months to go back to staff, ask for a number of corridor reviews where locations had been turned down previously based on insufficient pedestrian crossings. And instead of looking at just that criteria, just that metric, they're now looking at how long of a stretch do we have between crossing locations and is that safe. So I believe there has already been approved a new traffic signal location on Sheppard West between Quilter and Pewter, if I've got that correct. Those two streets don't quite align, so it's a bit complicated actually where the signal is going to go in. But that is progressing, and we hope to see that in place soon. More recently, we've been tackling Senlac and Willowdale Avenue for the same sorts of observations, and we addressed the intersection of Burnett and Senlac. It's one of the places where we thought we could break up a very long stretch of sort of uncontrolled road, causing some safety issues, and at the same time, hopefully help to better manage the traffic penetration into the neighborhood as well. So transportation operations have taken that back. They're giving that another look, and we're hoping to be able to advance on a signal in that location as a safe crossing location for the community.
Well, just a follow-up point too. On Willowdale over there, it looks great because there's like something like 5 crosswalks, a new bike lane as well, and there's a new light at the same sort of equivalent location as Burnett and Senlac. So it looks great over there, and that does feed into the area. But just a compliment on that, it's great over there, Willowdale. It's looking really good, and there's new lights, and the bike lane over there is great. Wouldn't mind seeing something like that on Senlac, because it does kind of affect the traffic flow too.
That's very much in the cycling plan. The Willowdale bike lane was really the first one in our community to open earlier this year, and long overdue. We set Willowdale as a priority because of the width of the road. It really was a racetrack. A lot of cars zipping along there. So putting in the bike lane not only works to create safe space for cyclists, but also to narrow the road and thereby slow down the cars that were going along there. So hopefully Senlac can move in the same direction in the next few years as well.
Okay, all right, thanks a lot. And I'll send in some of those examples of road closures that are equivalent to this kind of thing. All right, thanks a lot. It's good.
Thank you.
We may have another question from Jessica and Doug Merrick. I'll unmute them to see if they have another question.
No, we're good. Sorry, that was a mistake.
Okay, not a problem. Thank you.
Okay, Mark, does that summarize the questions that we've received in the Q&A?
There's one more question. We've had many from Kim Clark. We've had many collisions on Sheppard West between Fennel and Brentwood, including vehicles that come up over the curb. How has the high number of collisions been contemplated into the planning?
So the number of collisions I believe that have taken place in the area, I will ask Christina to respond to this portion of the question. I don't know that they've had any significant impact on this portion of Sheppard and the location of this site, but Christina, if the collision counts and that information was included as part of the transportation or traffic study that was submitted as part of this development application and you want to speak to that, that would be great.
Hi, it's Christina talking right now. I don't think the collision rate at that particular location was included as part of the study's scope, and to address the concerns of high collision rates in some areas, transportation services have conducted studies for through Vision Zero to mitigate some of the issues here, and the city is currently still working on the plans. And if there is a particular area that is outside of this development that you'd like to be reviewed, we can forward that to traffic operations, and they can review the numbers and suggest some measures if possible.
Okay, thanks, Christina, for answering that question. Mark, I just see that Kim has raised her hand. Do we want to unmute her?
Perfect. Hey, Kim, you're now unmuted. You now ask your question.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't understand the response. So we have had very significant number, but also I think the severity of the collisions, right? So prior to Brentwood, cars that come up over the curb, right? We had an ambulance that crashed into the corner house essentially not very long ago. I mean, I'm thinking of 4 major collisions within the last year and probably 6 or 7 in the last 2 or 3. So is the response that we are supposed to request for that to be included, or I just didn't understand the response?
Christina, are you able to provide clarity?
The particular location you're referring to isn't part of this application scope, and in order to review that specific location, we'll have to submit a different request to traffic operations for them to review the issue here.
Okay, and then what would that process be? Like, do we as a community do that?
I think in consultation with urban design and other sections of the city, we can recommend some measures. For example, installing bollards or other measures in the boulevard to help mitigate the issue.
I think the issue
that will have to be reviewed in a separate case, not inside the scope.
Sorry, let me jump in quickly if I can and just say, let us take that back. I think it's a fair observation, and I'm not sure something that would have been automatically triggered with transportation staff, in fairness, to take a look at, but probably should be, just given the number of issues that there have been. And I mean, we do know that Sheppard Avenue West is relatively narrow in its configuration, and notwithstanding some of the new measures that the city is taking, such as lowering speed limits on major arterials, there have been quite a number, and whether that's sort of a freak coincidence or some kind of underlying condition, I think it would make sense to take a look. So I'm assuming Catherine's there taking notes for all of these meetings, so I'm going to get her to remind me in the morning that we'll bring that to our transportation liaison to make sure that we're getting a look at that and seeing if we can get that addressed as we move forward with the neighborhood plan generally.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marcus. So I think that now concludes the formal question and answer period of this meeting. So I want to thank everybody who has attended and who participated in the Q&A portion of the meeting. If you feel that your questions weren't answered or that we've missed a question or you have any follow-up questions or comments, please send me an email or give me a call. I'm just going to put up my contact information here. I will do the best to answer any questions that I can, considering I'm not a transportation planner. If I can't answer them, I will send them to the appropriate staff. And just a reminder, we are looking into some potential changes to the boulevard in front of 5 Addington, which is the future park site, to see if we can implement, like I said, that boulevard extension, which would help to reduce speeding, and it would act as a traffic calming measure for that portion of the site. And although we are limited to some of the interventions we can implement as part of the development application, Marcus is working very closely with traffic operations to respond to a number of the other interventions and issues that have been raised to them. So thank you again, everybody, and please feel free to send me an email or give me a call if you would like to discuss anything further. And I think that concludes.
I see a hand raised from Catherine, if you'd like to talk.
Sure. Thanks. Victoria, can you just tell us when and where the meeting will be posted for people to view if they want to review it or haven't been able to participate?
So I'm actually going to ask Stephen to answer that question if he's still on the line, because he organized this meeting and I won't receive the recording of this or any of the notes that come as a result of it. So Stephen, if you are still around and are able to answer that.
I am able to answer the question in that it will be going on the city's YouTube page. When that will happen, I'm not 100% sure on. It takes approximately 24 hours for the meeting video along with the transcription, because it's transcribed onto the video before it's finalized. And I need to talk to our IT people then about the process for me to send them the video to have it posted. So as soon as I have a link to both the CCM earlier and this meeting, I will let the counselor's office know, as well as Victoria know, so that anybody who does want to find out rewatch it or pass it on, we will have those links to give them once they're posted. But that's on my tomorrow to-do list with our IT team.
Thank you, Stephen. So anybody that had trouble hearing him, he identified that the meeting recording will be available on the city's YouTube page. We're not exactly sure how long it'll take for that video to be posted, but as soon as we do have a time frame, we'll share that information with Councillor Fillian's office. And I will also be aware of it, so if you want to send us an email, we will be able to provide you with that information following the meeting. So if that's it for Catherine and Marcus, I think we're going to conclude the meeting. Again, thanks everybody for joining us on a Tuesday night, and we'll follow up with everybody soon, and it'd be great to hear from everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Victoria. Thanks, everybody.